LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Lydia. My name is Lydia Khalil. Thank you for watching and listening, those of you who listen on to the podcast. Today we have a conversation talking about religion, faith, and mental health. Is there a place for mental health in the body? I have a gentleman today who is going to journey with me as we talk about the challenges Christians might have if they have mental health, how it's managed in the church. I'll just read a little bit about him and then I'll ask him to come in. His name is Dr. Ayodele Ajayi. He's a consultant psychiatrist who has been working with the NHS for over 2 decades. His academic work has been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals in the UK and cited abroad. He is a newspaper columnist. He is a mentor. There's so many things to name him as, but I'll just bring him in. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's a privilege and an honor.
You're welcome. I read a little bit about you, but I'm sure I missed out a lot. But so tell us something that's not on the resume or on the little bio.
Possibly that some people know this, that I'm an identical twin.
Wow. Who is the older one?
I'm the first twin.
Oh, okay. So are you you're the older one, so you came out first?
Yes.
And are you still, I guess for you to say you're an identical twin, it means that you are still very close to one another.
Yes, we are, yes.
Does he live near you?
Oh, yes, only about 10 minutes away. 10, 15 minutes away. Yes.
Typical. I also have twin men that are they've been my friends for years, and they still live, like, I think almost literally next door, and they've been doing everything together forever. So pretty similar. So somebody who marries a twin must be really accommodating to the sibling. Is that the deal?
I think it comes with the territory. I think.
So marry a twin, you get the other sibling. I wouldn't say free, but that would not be nice. But the person, I think, has to have room for two. Great. Thank you again for coming. I think we were talking a little bit before we came on about, sort of systematic beliefs we have around mental health in church. And how do you feel church approaches mental health? Especially, I mean, you're a consultant, you're a psychiatrist and a Christian. So how do you feel the church approaches, looks, or deals with people who have mental health in the body?
That's a very interesting question, and I think it's a very relevant one as well. Yes, from my experience, I think there are a variety of ways that church approaches mental health and mental health problems or mental health conditions. Sometimes we wear the cap of avoidance, that it's not something that we talk about, just like other people don't talk about it. Sometimes we say it doesn't happen here, so that it's not spiritual to talk about it. So we sweep it under the carpet, even though the reality is that it is still happening, that there are Christians who have challenges with their mental well-being and who suffer from mental conditions. At other times, I do think that currently the trend appears to be changing. My experience over the lockdown, for instance, is that more and more it looks like conversations like this, thank you for having this type of conversation, and creating a platform for it. I think that conversations like this are beginning to happen, where church is really beginning to think that, is that really a very healthy approach? So that's another way to look at it. And I think the other way to look at it is that sometimes we also go the other side, in which we almost ostracize people who have a mental health problem, and we compound their stigma, because we feel that in one way or the other that they are responsible for whatever is happening to them at that time. So there are quite a variety of experiences that people have, and there are other places where people actually embrace people with mental health problems and actually support them, give them love and kindness, and also support them in every way to engage with mental services, and also to engage with the support from church.
So actually, what we're saying is that church is changing. Yeah.
Yes.
I think, I should say, in my experience, there was like a clear divide. If you had mental health before, it was, something demonic. But now the ethos is changing, I think, to where actually, as you said, the lockdown has done that. But I think prior to that, there are a few churches who've actually engaged with the concept of counseling, encouraging people actually to take medication. That's another thing. Because people say, oh, if I take medication, I'm going to be on it, for life. Is that true?
Yes. So the straight answer to that is it's not. So because there are various conditions that people have, mental conditions, there are various conditions that people have, and it's not necessarily the case that when somebody is on medication, they remain on medication all their lives. Sometimes people have a depressive episode, for instance. They have one depressive episode, and that's all they have in their lifetime. Sometimes it's just that life happens. So many things happen. Maybe people are stressed at work, they are bereaved, or they have things going on. They are homeless, or they lose their jobs. Something happens, and that tips them over. And with support, with talking therapies, as you said, counseling, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, vocational support, they're able to bounce back on their feet, and they take medication for a while, and then they don't need to take medication again. But the important thing is always to emphasize that that decision, I think, should always be in conjunction or in agreement and collaboration with the prescriber of the medication. And that's where sometimes that's also something we need to pay attention to in church. Sometimes I hear ministers who say, go and throw away your medication. Don't. I don't think it's a very safe advice to give, because I think that everybody has got their roles in the church, and God has put people who are doctors there for a reason.
Because sometimes it's maybe be said in a way that if you take medication, it means you don't have faith.
About that too.
There's the conflict of that, and the person is sitting there saying, are they saying that God cannot heal them, and the medication is what is the cure or the healing? So if we bring this idea of faith as well, that when people are told these things, it's not because it's not a challenge to their faith, because God is God and he will do anything that he wants to do. But actually the medication is an aid, the same way we would take, I know some people don't take things like pain relievers, or they believe that the headache or the ache will go in itself. But I think the emphasis is that if people need medication, they need to take it for as long as they need it. And as you said,
Absolutely.
as the prescriber has advised them to. So that's sort of low level people that have the occasional, depressive episode. Something has happened that their anxiety levels have really gone off the wall, and they can't manage. So can we talk a little bit about like medium, what would be a medium level of somebody suffering with mental health? Because what I guess we're talking about is maybe base level, where it could be me or you who's being challenged. We have talking therapy, we take the medication, and we're fine, and we move on with life. But then there are people a little bit who have a little bit more challenge than that to work with.
So in that case, I think what you are referring to start with, I think most mental health conditions are common mental health conditions. So a great majority of mental health conditions don't even come to this attention of mental services in terms of psychiatrists. However, there are also what we sometimes are called severe enduring mental illnesses. And those are ones in which more specialist support is needed. And indeed, there are people who will need to remain on medication for a very, very long time to keep them well. But usually, the way I say it is this, that the fact that somebody starts medication is not the reason why they remain on medication all their life or for a long time. The reason why they need to remain on medication is the nature of the condition. I think it's very important to, it's the nature of the condition. And the illustration I usually give is that if somebody gets diagnosed with diabetes, for instance, and they are placed on insulin, it's that type of thing that they continue to take their insulin, and they could be here for the next 50 years, they could be here for the next 60 years, even though they were diagnosed in their 20s or in their 30s. And sometimes as well, people get diagnosed with thyroid problems, hypothyroidism, low thyroid levels, and they take thyroxine and they remain well for years and years and years. So sometimes for those who have a diagnosis of a severe enduring mental illness, and those will be things like schizophrenia, manic depression, of such people who are experiencing such conditions, sometimes they will need to be on medication for a very, very long time. But the way to say it is that it's not only medication that is also being offered. There's talking therapies, there's support with vocation, there's social support. So it's a holistic, and of course, faith is good for mental health. I think I need to say that very clearly.
Yes.
And there's plenty of research, volumes and volumes of research showing that faith is actually good for mental health. So I want to be balanced there. I'm not throwing faith out of the picture at all. I'm a pastor myself, so I wouldn't do that. Faith is good for mental health, so I need to say round it up on that level.
Okay, all right. And then there are people who are really unwell, mental health, and maybe I would say the sort of high end people who may be sectioned from time to time, or may actually remain sectioned or sectioned for most of their life. So I just want us to sort of differentiate the levels, because sometimes when we hear people, oh, I feel depressed, or somebody's taking medication, we go from that 0 place to 100. So tell us somebody who is unwell and needs sectioning, or may even be in section for quite long periods in their life.
Okay. So thank you for that question. So we've talked about the common mental health conditions, and we've talked about people who have moderate degree of illnesses. Severe illnesses would be people who, for one reason or the other, they are so unwell that they have lost touch with reality. So that would mean that, for instance, they might be hearing voices when there is no sounds. They might believe in their thoughts that there are people who are plotting against them or trying to harm them. or sometimes it could also be that their sleep is affected. They're not able to sleep at night. They keep awake all night. So there are various symptoms, but really it becomes we only consider hospital treatment because when we talk about severity, we are looking at hospital treatment mostly, or what is called the home treatment team. The home treatment team is an intensive team where the community, it's a group of psychiatrists, social workers, nurses that will actually go into people's home and they can see them up to twice a day or as the need requires. But for people to then need to go into hospital, it will mean two things. It will mean that they are at risk of harm either to themselves or at risk of harm to others. So risk will usually be the driving factor here. Is this person such that if they remain at home, they are either likely to be at risk of taking their own lives, or they're likely to be at risk of coming to inadvertent harm because they are no longer, they don't have the presence of mind, or they're at risk of harming others. And the third criteria will be also the risk of further deterioration of their mental health if nothing is done. So when one of these criteria is met, just a single one of them, either risk of harm to self, risk of harm to others, or further deterioration of mental health, and the person who is in question is not in a position to make a decision, their mind is so troubled that they don't have what we call a capacity to make a decision whether to come into hospital or not. And we know or suspect that there is a mental illness. That is when we then go ahead to do what is called a mental health act assessment. And that's when people get admitted into hospital by detention.
Okay. And I know part of asking all these questions is so that when people feel unwell and somebody's saying to them, go to your GP, so that people don't automatically think when I get to my GP, the next thing he's going to send me to the psychiatrist, the next thing I'm going to be sectioned. So I guess that's why I'm trying to say, okay, there's sort of everyday incidences, which you call the common sort of known illnesses around mental health. The middle or second layer, and then the third layer where people are really unwell, where either they're suffering from something like schizophrenia or bipolar, or really big illnesses. So in comparison, if I guess we want to compare it, we would compare it just as we said, a period where somebody has maybe a backache that lasts for a little while, where they're taking medication, walking, doing exercise, losing weight, and they don't have the ache. And then the next level is the one like people who get diabetes and on this medication for either long periods, sometimes can be changed with diet and exercise. And then we have people who are unwell, let's use cancer.
Or a stroke, or a heart attack.
A heart attack, where they need to be in hospital and they need to be looked after quite intensely and more carefully than somebody who is just having a depressive episode for a month or so. So that people know that actually mental health can be in stages, and it varies from person to person. And going to your GP and saying, I feel depressed, I'm crying a lot, I'm having high levels of anxiety, and them prescribing something is not a journey to ending up in hospital, at least for a majority of
people. Yeah. And about 60 to 70% of people with mental conditions are managed in primary care under the care of their GPs.
So not most of the people who have mental health challenges are in the community, going to work, have families, children,
and do everything that we
yes, they're doing everything else that everybody else is doing. We're just not aware that they're unwell, because I think that also helps with the shame and the stigma that goes around mental health. I think also we church people tend to want to hide a lot of the stuff that isn't great. So somebody's unwell, they might easily pray for somebody who has cancer, but nobody's going to admit that they're having struggles with mental health, because everybody's going to feel, okay, they're losing it when they're not, they're just struggling a little bit. Okay, I'm going to talk about something which is quite big and has been on the news a lot. This, I don't think it's new. I think we're just more aware of it. This topic that we hear, and we've unfortunately, I know people who have committed suicide now. And there is a lot of mystery around it. I think even in our work, it's something that people sometimes really can't understand, especially if you're working with a client that has suicidal thoughts. It can be sometimes inexplicable, where you're trying to understand actually why they feel this is the only way out. Can you talk just a little bit about it, so that people have some understanding around how people struggle with those suicidal thoughts?
Yeah. So suicide is quite, like you say, it's something that is becoming, attention has been drawn to it, even though in reality we know that the figures don't show, particularly over the lockdown, that has been an increase in suicide rates, which is quite interesting. There is no statistics showing that. However, what we do know is that, however, what we do know is, this is something that we can all do something about. I think that's the reassuring thing, that really, as Christians, as church, as individuals, we can all do something about suicide. And that's by being a brother's keeper. We do know that there are certain things that increase suicide risk. We know that it's commoner in mental health conditions generally. We know that it's commoner in people who are homeless. We know that it's commoner in people who are middle-aged men. We know that it's also commoner in people who are undergoing one form of distress or the other. It could be homelessness, it could be unemployment. Those are the type of things, domestic violence. Those are, and also we do also know that people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds also are more at risk. So really, I think the message here is that it's really about looking out for each other, because there are certain things that have been associated with suicide. You were talking about what could be going on in the minds of these people. It's feelings of entrapment, feelings of hopelessness, and feelings of not having a way out. And when people get to a point in which they feel that they are trapped, they feel that they don't have any easy answers any longer, and that they are at a dead end. This is when you get people attempting to take their lives. And so, really, one of the things that we can do is to be on the lookout for people like that in our community. If you suddenly find that a neighbor that you are very familiar with is no longer about, thankfully now, social distance, the lockdown regulations are such that it's allowing us to meet outside. It's just about checking up on each other and also being aware of what the risk factors are. The other risk factor that I want to emphasize is also among young people. We are now finding out that young people, young men, young women, who are in their 20s, in fact, alarmingly, suicide is now one of the commonest causes of death among people who are between 24 and 35 years old. And those are the things that really give concern, but there are also things that we can apply ourselves to and be conscious about. So usually when young people are facing difficulties in their lives, in terms of when they feel they've reached a dead end, maybe because of a job loss or even a relationship breakdown, or a bereavement, sometimes, or when they are facing difficulties in their career path, maybe they can't make a headway in their careers, they find that those are the times to support them. I think social support is one of the strongest things that we can give to people who are going through difficulty and who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, but also importantly to support them to get help, to let them know that it's not a shameful thing to actually ask for help. Everybody needs help at one point in their lives or the other. There is no superhuman who is always 100% of the time. Such people don't exist. And it's important for us to allow our young people to know that and to actually support them in getting help. And the first place to get help will be their general practitioner. That's always the first person to speak to when that is happening.
Also, because a lot of times when families, especially with young people, commit suicide, there's this big unanswered space. The parents can't figure out why. The siblings are lost, especially if they haven't written anything or they haven't given an explanation. What because when I explain it and I say, look, sometimes they feel this is the only way out, or they feel they're a burden to the family, and this will in somehow help solve something that probably the family doesn't even know is a problem or considers a problem. But they still feel guilty. They still feel there is something they could have done. There is a difference they could have made. How, I know we can't sort of, soothe it all away. Yeah. But what can they hold? Is there something they can hold on to?
Yeah. I think there's a lot they can hold on to. I think that if the first thing is to know that sometimes when suicide happens, even despite the best effort of those who are involved, despite the best effort of the families, these things, the mental services, the spiritual support, these things still happen. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the reality that sometimes that these things happen. So it's important to rid oneself of that guilt. The other thing is that it's also helpful to engage with other parents, other siblings, other people who have had similar experience, because people find that that sort of communal support, that sort of drawing strength from each other can be very helpful. And there are a number of organizations where they actually support, there are charities that are specifically geared towards supporting people who have been bereaved by suicide. That's the other thing. The other thing is actually that they can also carry that further by actually being a champion of mental health education, mental health advocacy. I know a number of families who actually took on that advocacy as a result of losing a child or losing a parent or losing somebody to suicide. That can also be very rewarding, because you feel that you are giving something back that you are not able to that you are not able to receive yourself. And we know that giving is a very powerful thing in mental health and mental well-being. So really, those are the three things that people can consider. But importantly, to know that guilt can be a very devastating thing. It can be a very consuming thing, and really, sometimes, despite best efforts, people still take their lives. And it's most times it's usually sometimes it's a spur of the moment decision, and nobody could do much about that.
Okay, so they can accept what has happened. That's what you're saying. It's a good point. It's a good place to begin their healing.
Their journey,
join groups of other people who've suffered a similar experience, and of course you can, or they can, in their own way, help other people who've suffered as well, because it is a devastating thing, even to lose or to lose somebody. If people are poorly or there's an accident, it's somehow explainable, but when it's suicide, it almost feels unfair and not a good way. And sometimes there could be this agitation that they will not go to heaven because they've done this thing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to say two things quickly. One of them is about the fact that it's also important for people to recognize that sometimes they will go through phases of bereavement in which they will feel angry, and sometimes one of the things that Christian people might also find difficult to handle is that they're angry at the person who has died by suicide. They almost feel that they let them down. They almost feel that they stigmatized them, or they almost feel that they've put them to shame in one way or the other. Those are normal feelings, and it's good to just accept the fact that they are normal feelings. They are phrases that people go through, and that they will get over it. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The other thing about people thinking, oh, are they going to go to heaven, or and that sort of thing. I think that that decision is not a human decision. We are not the ones who decide that, and we shouldn't grapple with such things. And those whatever happens in those final moments, it's only God knows. I mean, I wouldn't say because somebody died by suicide they are not going to go to heaven. It's not never something that we should consider, because it's not within our prerogative, really.
To do that. And I just to agree with you that God understands the state of everybody, at what level, where their mind was, and he always has compassion. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's not ours to think or to decide. And sometimes I say even the people we think are going may not make it because they have this outwardly appearance does not mean the inside is acceptable to him. All right, thank you for that. I wanted to actually talk about this. You mentioned middle-aged Black men. Yeah, and I know you do a lot of work around men and mental health and depression. Why do you think it's okay? I think suicide is like the end of their struggle. When they feel they can't. What makes it challenging for men to say they're grappling with mental health?
Thank you for asking that question, because it's yeah. Now, the reality is that I think men and women in any culture in the world are raised differently. I think in most cultures of the world, men are raised, particularly when we then get to Black minority or ethnic groups. Um, Men are raised to be stoic. Men are raised to be strong and to have a stiff upper lip, in which we just take everything chin on without ever showing emotions, without ever expressing any hurts. It's like men are meant to be robots. And that's something that from very earlier on, you are trained to be like that. And so by the time you become an adult, it's something that you have imbibed, and it's something that it's become second nature. And so as a result of that, when men are going through difficulties, men are not usually very forthcoming. Men don't want to say express emotions publicly or cry publicly, and those are things that are very damaging, because one way or the other the emotions will come out. If it's anger, one way or the other, if it's not turned out, it will then turn in. And that's sometimes because one of the hypotheses of suicide is anger turned inside. When one is not able to turn that anger outside, then one then turns it on oneself. Of course, the other thing is that women are more forthcoming with peer support. Women would usually talk about their pains and their challenges in every sphere of their lives, but that's not always the case with men. However, that's also something that I feel is changing. I do think it's early days, but I think that particularly Black men, Christian men, people are beginning to think that, is this really serving us? The fact that we are chinning up and trying to brace up, and we are finding that it's not working. So those are part of the issues that currently take place.
So how does a woman tackle this at home? If she will know that he's struggling, um, it might be something quite obvious, like maybe a job loss, or it might not even be a job loss. It might just be something internal, or maybe something from work. So how does a wife, a sister, a friend sort of maneuver and say I'm here. Because usually, if you ask, as you said, being quite stoic, most men would just say, "Oh, I'm all right," even though they know they're not all right. The person asking the question knows they're not all right, but they've been shoved off, and there's no way in. You know, he's closed. You know, it's closed down for today. So how give us a tip how we can maneuver our way.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's only one answer to that question.
So tell
But
us
the
all the
interesting,
answers. I'm sure all the
oh,
women are
I
thinking.
hope I do have them. I think there are a number of things. It's important for the man to still feel in control and to feel in charge. And I think that's very crucial. So, and that person in their lives, that lady in their lives, that wife, that spouse, knows them well enough, knows the time when they are most likely to be receptive. There are certain times that men are receptive, more receptive to being spoken to than other times. So it's about choosing one's time to start with. I know that those things look very trivial, but the likelihood of being successful in that type of conversation is about choosing one's time, is about also going not with prescriptions, but going just wanting to listen, um, just wanting to be a listener, to be open about really just being interested in knowing what's happening in that person's life. I think also when the conversation progresses, there's also the bit about actually supporting the man to get the help in terms of, if you think there's a vantage point, you think you've got the conversation to the point in which this person is now saying, yes, maybe I would ask for help after all. Really seizing the moment and taking the bull by the horns and saying, for instance, I will support you, make the call with you, or actually go with you to see the GP if that's the type of person that person is, that they will need that type of support. But sometimes as well, if it's getting to the point in which somebody knows that this is getting crucial, it may help to involve somebody who knows the man well, somebody that they think the man will listen to. So it could be their, it depends. The spouse will know their man well. It could be their pastor, it could be their best friend. Sometimes another man speaking to another man in a way to say, look, we're all in this together might help.
Okay. All right. So it's seizing the moment. That's the, I guess, the bottom line. You know, knowing where a good place
Yeah.
to ask the question, or and I think also the watchword was, women like to fix. You know, we bring a solution. So this is what I'm going through. This is what's happening at work. Tell your manager, tell your boss, or quit. So not to offer solutions, um, just to listen, which I think is quite. I think that's the thing we miss out the most in our relationships, the inability to listen, but the choice to want to save or solve, or bring an answer. So I hope all the women are listening and they they made notes. All right, let's move to um, something that's a little bit different. Well, not different, but you chose, I guess, doctors choose their specialism at one point. So what made you choose psychiatry?
Right. So I think psychiatry chose me. I didn't choose psychiatry, but I'm so grateful to God I'm here. I think it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. However, I think the what's most attractive about psychiatry is that we get to spend a lot of time with our patients. I've always been interested in human beings. I've been interested in how human beings operate, how they relate, how they socialize, uh, particularly also how childhood experiences determine the outcome in life. So those are the type of things that in psychiatry we're able to do a lot about. And also, as psychiatrists, we're able to engage with people in their physical health, in their mental well-being, and generally about it's a holistic approach towards medicine. And that's one of the things that also attracted me. And finally, the final one is that we get to spend a long time with our patients, and so we get to know the person behind the illness, or the person behind the label. We get to know the real person, and I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot from my patients, and that's why, yeah, that's the long and short of it, really.
So how does that sit with your faith? Because almost sometimes when we're dealing with the realm of the mind, you know, there was something you wrote saying that Christians, you know, there's a difference between the soul and the spirit. You know, when I was reading a bit about you before coming on, so, and we almost want to believe that everything in, you know, in the mind has some kind of, you know, if you're unwell mentally, so there's some kind of demonic interference, or, you know, it, and the only way that we can solve that is by, you know, prayer and deliverance and anointing and you know, holy water, whatever it is that they do. So how does that balance sit for you, as a professional, as a pastor?
I think both as a professional and as a pastor, or as a Christian, really, I think my understanding of Bible, that human beings, as human beings, we are spirits, we have a soul, and we live in a body, is very crucial, and that's we know, that's very scriptural. I wouldn't quote the scriptural references, but we know it's true, and so many times as Christians we pay attention to the body and we pay attention to the spirit, but sometimes we neglect the soul. But actually, in the Bible doesn't tell us to neglect the soul. There are scriptures that actually say, receive the engrafted word of God, which is able to save your souls. The Bible also tells us about the weapons of our warfare are not being carnal, but pulling down strongholds, and those strongholds are in the mind. So really, when we when we do the quick fix of, oh, I'm just going to lay hands on somebody and or anoint them with oil, and that's going to be the end of it. It's not always the case. I think that another weapon that God uses to help us to be able to live a fulfilled life and to live a full life is the use of His Word, and that's using the Word of God to renew our minds. So it's not always. So I think that view is a bit not wholesome. I would rather see it as a wholesome package in which we are addressing the body, we are addressing the spirit, and we are addressing the soul. And I think that's what the gospel is about. The gospel is a total package.
I think also, you know, the soul, the spirit is, you know, reborn. The soul also is divided into the mind, where the intellect is.
The mind, the thought, the intellect.
Yes. So that soul, sometimes we feel like, oh, the soul has been saved, I'm going to heaven. So everything that is contained in that somehow is renewed automatically, which
is not.
Yes, we know that God is a miracle worker, but it's not, and it's in that mind, that place that we fight most battles, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
That's where we fight fear. That's where we fight doubt. That's where we fight anxiety. That's where we fight, you know, even if rejection, abandonment, suicide, divorce.
Trauma.
You know, all manner of trauma is fought in that realm, and talking therapy helps actually to renew the mind. And you know, before we came on, you were talking about CBT. I'm sure when you read a lot of these things, like when I do, I actually see the word of God in them. And
absolutely.
Somebody copied this. You know, they just copied it, and it's labeled differently, but this is actually the word. So I guess when people hear psychiatry, or when they hear, you know, psychologist or therapist or counselor, I don't know whether you get it. Sometimes they feel like we're not dealing with the real issues. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah, it does. Yes, sometimes, I hear people who say that we are not really addressing the real issue. but my answer to that is always that one of the most prominent verses of scripture that I think can liberate somebody is Romans 12:1. And it talks about renewing our minds. It talks about the fact that we can be transformed. And sometimes healing for mental problems is a transformation because a lot of people go through trauma, they go through childhood experiences that have been there for years and years, and layers of thinking, layers of doing things in a particular pattern has actually become what sometimes we call core beliefs or negative automatic thoughts, in which somebody thinks in a particular toxic way. And sometimes it's going to take time to break down those experiences. Sometimes it's like rethinking in a different way. Usually I talk about the fact that those thoughts need to be recognized. They need to be challenged. They need to be rationalized, and actually that then they need to be replaced. And replacement is about replacing them with what is the truth, the new truth, and that's simply what cognitive behavioral therapy tells us about really challenging some of the negative thoughts we have and replacing them with what is really truth, being able to rationalize them. That is this really true? So yes, I think it's important to look at it in a more holistic way than just being very narrow about the view of it.
Yeah, and I think this concept about there being a separation, my body is healed, my spirit is born again, and my mind somehow, doesn't do
Floating
all
around.
things. Yes, and actually that renewing of the mind, it includes culture, things that we were
Absolutely.
told this is the culture, and we never challenge them, and it brings also religion, because sometimes we say, oh, this is how it's done, this is the religious, well, I would call it religious, but they would say this is how it's scripturally done, or this is the belief of the church, which sometimes does not actually align with the word, or it's just somebody's interpretation that has now become set, and then it becomes a system of belief, and people grow up, and even when they come to church, unable to challenge some of this thinking. And I think even sometimes we're just given things, and I always make this joke that sometimes we become born again and we leave our brains outside. We don't bring it into church to sort of listen to what is being said. Think, okay, is this what the word says, or is this actually acceptable? Yeah, to me, is this what is true, or this is somebody's interpretation? So we are not, I think, let me say, we, meaning are sometimes not allowed to challenge because of cultural childhood, the way we were brought up, where we never challenged authority, not in a rebellious way, but in a way of thinking something through and saying, does this actually make sense, what we do?
And that's and that, I think it's something that we need to teach our children. That's something we need to teach young adults, to really, the fact that we are Christians, God has given us an intellect as well. He's given us a mind. And there's a reason why our minds are there. There's a reason why God didn't create us with a spirit and a body without a soul. So
and
that soul of,
let's reason together.
yes.
So if you can reason with him, then you can reason with everybody else. I'm going to read, I didn't want to get it wrong. There's you do some type of mentoring. I'm calling it some type. I'm sorry. The executive lead and founder of Mentor into Medicine. How did you come up with that?
Right. So Mentor into Medicine is a mentoring organization that started about 7 years ago. And it was following requests that I had from parents who were always asking me to support their children to enter into medical school. At the time, things are changing now, but at the time, it was pretty difficult for people of color, particularly Black ethnic minority backgrounds, who may also be from socially disadvantaged backgrounds, to get into UK medical schools. And there were research showing this. And so that's where we started from. And so currently what we do is we organize events where we invite parents and we invite young people to show them the ropes about how to enhance their chances of getting into medical school. But more importantly as well, we also support young people on an individual basis to support them through the application process from about year 12 till they put in the application. And thankfully, God has blessed the work and we are getting good results.
Okay. Just how important is that, this concept of mentoring? How important is that to the young people who are coming up behind us? Because I think it's now, to me, I believe that's the only way you can leave a legacy, by giving something that you have to somebody else. So please talk a little bit about that, because that might kick off other people thinking of doing something similar.
Yes, I think mentoring is like you say, is one of the most powerful ways that one can leave a legacy. And more importantly, I think to the mentee, mentoring is getting the experience of some other without paying the price of the pain. So basically, you get the experience, somebody gets to hand you the experience of their life, but you don't get to go through the pain that they went through to get that experience.
You don't get to make all the mistakes.
You don't get to make all their mistakes because they tell you that's the way not to do it. I've done it and it doesn't work. And because of that, I think it enhances your path in your purpose. It gives you speed. I think it also opens doors. I think mentoring opens doors for mentees, and particularly, I think that when it comes to really who benefits from mentoring the most, I think is the mentor, because the fulfillment you get from having a legacy, the fulfillment you get from really impacting, being part of somebody else's success story is priceless. And of course, we also do know that that sort of gratification is very, very good for mental well-being. We know that people who give without expecting anything back, that's one of the most powerful things that enhances our mental well-being. So I would recommend mentoring to anyone any day.
Okay. I'll just digress a bit. When you were talking about young people actually being challenged into getting into maybe even the better unis and the better institutions. So do you feel, which we know could be or is part of being a minority and the racism that's either internalized or is on display, do you feel that some people don't like this word, but people in BAME groups, what happens to us in the mental health sector?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting question. I think that indeed there's been quite a lot of research showing that sometimes that, for instance, people who are second generation Black British are up to 14 times more likely to be admitted forcefully into hospital in mental health institutions in the UK. And there's quite a lot of statistics about that. That's true. However, I do think that quite a lot is now changing. I do feel, for instance, that the Royal College of Psychiatrists has actually taken on the issue of race and discrimination heads-on. In the past year, quite a lot has been done. If one goes onto the website of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, you can tell that race and discrimination is something that the college is taking heads on. And really, if psychiatrists are not addressing these issues, which medical specialty should be addressing it? Because really, we are the ones who are suited, we are the ones who are equipped to do it. And I want to say that we are doing it. And the reason I'm saying this is to sort of put a message of reassurance out there for people who might need services. And because of that, they feel that they're going to be discriminated again. And because of that, they don't engage. I want to say that there's also a lot of people who are from the BAME community who are actually leaders in mental services in this country. I think that a sizable proportion of mental health leaders, clinical leaders in mental health, are actually from minority ethnic groups. So we can identify with your problems. We know what we can identify with your background. And so in that way, we're also shaping services to make sure that they cater for the needs of people of faith, they cater for the needs of people of color, and they cater for the needs of people who are also on the fringes of society. So I'm expecting things to continue to get better. But the word I really want to leave is that please don't, for that reason, not engage with services.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. What would you like to leave with us today?
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I think the way I would like to round this up is that I think life is really about purpose. I think we are here on assignment. I think there is a reason why we are here. And I want to speak to young people particularly. I want you to celebrate your uniqueness. Not only do we now know that every human being on earth is unique, out of the 7 billion people on earth, we all have unique fingerprints. Recently, I was preparing for an event, and I actually read that, in fact, not only do we have unique fingerprints, that even the architecture of our brains are also unique in individuals. So that's interesting. But the point I'm trying to make is that please celebrate your uniqueness and don't let anyone stop you. Don't let any circumstance or situation stop you. And that also includes people who are encountering problems with their mental health at this time. Mental health problems need not be a deterrent from fulfilling your purpose, from going after the things that you desire to do. But it starts with getting help. It is very, very, very important to ask for help, because if you don't ask for help, you will not be in a position in which you are in a robust place to then pursue the things that you are here for. So, and that's really the message I would like to round up with.
Thank you, Dr. Ajayi, for your time. And I think what has been most fascinating is all your knowledge. You've made it really simple for everybody to be able to understand and to glean from it. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your love of psychiatry, mentoring, the church, the Lord. And I'm sure you'll be back again.
Thank you for having me on the program. It's been really very educational for me. And I think it's good that you are creating these platforms for these very interesting conversations to take place. So thank you for the great work that you do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. What an interesting conversation. Very simply put, full of knowledge, full of wisdom, full of the Spirit of God. Till we meet again, thank you for joining us. My name is Lydia Khalil. This is Conversations with Lydia.
LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.